And now I'm going to turn over the remainder of the program to my colleague, Julie Burros from our cultural planning team. Thank you.
Super-crowded public meetings are my favorite thing on the whole planet, so thank you for making me really happy today. I'm going to be as brief as I possibly can while giving you lots of great information and setting you up for the real work at hand tonight, which is a breakout discussion group. So as Commissioner Boone said, you're here tonight to help us create the first ever public art master plan for Chicago. And as she mentioned, this is a follow-up to the Chicago Cultural Plan, and we're again asking for your help, your ideas, your energy, your enthusiasm, and also your critical thinking so that we can ensure our plan really reflects what the people of Chicago want to see in our city. So very quickly, a little bit about our department. It's the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. We have a fairly new mission to enrich Chicago's artistic vitality and cultural vibrancy. And with this planning effort, we acknowledge the important role that public art plays in these. The department is very multifaceted. I'm sure you're really familiar with our programs. They range from producing exhibits, like in this gallery, operating a cultural center, Millennium Park, and several other venues. We make grants to both artists and nonprofit organizations, and there's the festivals and events that we produce both downtown and in the neighborhoods. And then, of course, we administer the city's Percent for Art program, and a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Now, a little bit about the cultural plan. As many of you know, and I'm sure many of you participated in it, Chicago had an earlier cultural plan before the 2012 cultural plan that was done under the Mayor Harold Washington administration in 1986. And why did we create a new cultural plan? It was a recommendation of Mayor Emanuel's 2011 transition plan, and it was an opportunity to engage in a citywide dialogue about why culture matters. Our process was very participatory, honoring the planning process that was undertaken in the mid-1980s. We continue that tonight. For the cultural plan, we kicked off in February of 2012 with 4 big town hall meetings, a whole series of community conversations, stakeholder focus groups, industry convenings, and issued a draft cultural plan to ask, did we get it right? And then again had another series of town hall meetings. We issued the final cultural plan in mid-October of 2012 alongside our colleagues at CPS and Ingenuity Inc., who had created an abstract for an arts education plan for CPS. So just as a reminder, the cultural plan, I'm sure all of you have read it many times over, just like me. Just to remind you, in case you're not familiar, there's 10 key priorities. We've been hard at work implementing the plan, and the first year have identified about 50% of the plan initiatives have been addressed in some way. And I'm very careful to say addressed, because so many aren't one and done, but represent existing and ongoing efforts by many different entities, not just DCASE. So the plan has 4 overarching categories: people, places, policies, and planning culturally. They're populated by 10 key priorities that you see here, and they reflect what we heard in the public process to create the plan. You can see that many of them relate to public art, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that now. Under the people category, there's the priority to attract and retain artists and creative professionals. It's particularly relevant, the particularly relevant recommendation is to grow and diversify sources and methods of support. Other recommendations include creating grants and incentives to generate local creative production in new genres, disciplines, and emerging art forms, and to grow sustainable support structures for self-funded arts programs and projects, and to maintain DCASE grants for artists and fully leverage public funding for community transformation. In the places category, the priority is to elevate and expand neighborhood cultural assets. A key way to do that is by expanding art in public places. and to identify specific sites, such as bridges and walls of buildings, to be programmed with changing exhibits or that can accommodate permanent installations, and to perhaps have an expanded multimedia arts program featuring visual arts, poetry, but could also include performing arts, digital arts, sound and light installations. Expanding art in public places also means we need to streamline approvals for street vendors, performance artists, and street art installations, and allow for pop-up installations and vehicles that could sell food and art throughout the city. Places also includes the priority to facilitate neighborhood planning of cultural activity. Increasing the spaces for culture in every neighborhood could be done by supporting the creation of temporary art installations in brownfields, along fences, walls, overpasses, and viaducts, and other found spaces that artists can transform throughout the city. And people told us they want more neighborhood involvement in the selection and installation of projects. Under the category of policies, there's a priority to optimize city policies and regulation. Building a pro-culture government could take the form of a designated cultural point person in city departments, and we need to ensure plans created by city departments explore how culture can be incorporated in their work. And creating new funding mechanisms means that the current Chicago Percent for Art ordinance should be updated to reflect global best practices and encourage collaboration among chambers of commerce to integrate art throughout commercial districts. And perhaps even includes creating a public art trust, providing an alternative funding mechanism that builds an endowment to support art in public places, as well as funding for culture to be included as a percentage of infrastructure projects. The final category, planning culturally, calls for international cultural exchanges that could result in new public art projects here and abroad, and could include pop-up installations in collaboration with Chicago cultural organizations and international designers, architects, thinkers, and artists. Planning culturally also includes being innovative. How can we foster public art that features the most innovative approaches and ideas and includes technology-driven art showcasing our cutting-edge thinkers and makers? It could also include light and sound installation, digital arts, computer innovation, and maybe even something a little bit low-tech that still features a very innovative approach. So where are we now? As you know, Chicago has an incredible reputation for great public art. You can see it all around you in this amazing exhibit. And there's a huge amount of interest in expanding public art. But the reality is we have very limited avenues of support. The city processes for approval of non-city driven projects is unclear, and the Percent for Art mechanism produces very little new art when there are no new buildings or renovation projects happening. And just to review, I bet most of you guys know all this detail, but just in case you don't, when we say public art, we're using this term very broadly to include all kinds of art in public places. When we say Percent for Art, we're talking very specifically about art that's produced because a small percentage of the construction budget, 1.33%, is budgeted that is from a new building or a substantial renovation of a public building that's required to be spent on art for that particular building or site. So the city of Chicago has had a Percent for Art ordinance since 1978. It's not the first one in the country, but is considered really a model for many other cities. But at this point, in 2014, it's time for an update. So we aren't starting this plan from scratch. Our staff have been very carefully listening to the community and stakeholders during the cultural plan process and since the cultural plan process. You saw how the cultural plan has so. We've been researching best practices and working on a set of core values and a draft mission for public art in Chicago. So this is a draft. You're the first ones to get a look at it. It's a mission for the public art program, and the mission would be to advance the crucial role that artists play in transforming public spaces into extraordinary places. And this mission is informed by a set of core values. And these are really important, so I am going to read these out. I know it might be kind of hard to see these. You're going to have a copy of these in your breakout groups. But I'm just going to read them out. Public art is an equal and interdependent element of a remarkable city's infrastructure. Innovative public art is artist-led. Artists should be embedded into the planning and development processes of widespread city initiatives. Artists are professionals and must always be paid for their diverse and valuable contributions. Our staff was predicting people would burst into applause as we read these, so thank you for delivering. For a city to retain artists need opportunities to experiment and grow at every phase of their development. Neighborhoods should be empowered to employ professional artists in the transformation of communities. And there is great return when we invest in the ideas of the world's most exciting artists, many of whom live right here in Chicago. Well, all right, so now on to the real work. We're going to get you organized in the breakout discussion groups. So many of you have a handout that you got when you came in the door. We've identified 6 initial topics that have emerged from all this listening and meetings we've had. And the 6 are, what are the roles and responsibilities of public art? Expanding the traditional definition of public art to include new genres of contemporary works. What are the innovative sites and locations for public art? What are some possible new funding sources? How can we embed artists into municipal, private, and neighborhood development teams? And what are issues specific to public artists and producers of public art? So these are your breakout groups. We're going to come back to those, don't worry. In each of the breakout groups, there's a facilitator who has a list of discussion points and some prompts to get you going, and I'm sure you guys have plenty to say on all these topics. We want you to think about best practices and great examples that relate to your breakout group. What are some of the challenges and obstacles that you found? What are some possible solutions? We want you to have a discussion for about a half an hour and summarize maybe your top 3 priorities that you came up with in your group, and then everyone's going to reconvene at about 7 o'clock and report back to the whole group.